Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this, our second Task Force Campus Conversation. I'm Rose Martinelli, Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, and I'm so pleased to be able to facilitate the Strategic Budget Initiative on behalf of the university. And I want to thank you. More than 500 people registered for today's session, and we're grateful that you're spending time with us today. As we begin today, I'd like to introduce you to the 5 various task forces that make up the Strategic Budget Initiative. Today, we're going to think about a little bit and learn more about the Operations Alignment Task Force. And I'd like to introduce you to those co-chairs today. First, I'd like to introduce you to Carmen Gonzalez. She's the Assistant Vice President for Procurement Services. And to Michelle Singletary. She is the Interim Director of Residential Education. And I want to thank the two of you for co-chairing such an important task force on behalf of the Financial Sustainability Initiative. You've done an amazing amount of work here, and we're really grateful for that. If you haven't already had a chance, I would urge you to visit the Financial Sustainability website for more information about the various task forces, a little bit about the working groups that are being launched and how they all interrelate together. But before we begin, I want to remind you what is the Strategic Budget Initiative here at the university. So we are a recommending body. There are 5 task forces that have been created to study areas of opportunity at the institution. These 5 task forces then are combined into the Financial Sustainability Committee. And that group, as we gather together, allows us to see problems and opportunities and where they intersect. This body starts to help us to understand how to communicate more effectively, how to work more collectively well together, and then prioritize the initiatives that we believe are most viable for increasing our financial viability going forward. These ideas and initiatives then go up to the executive leadership for their understanding approval process, and then comes back to the financial sustainability teams, and then back down to the task forces. We also have launched a number of working groups that we'll talk a lot more about this afternoon, but it's important to know that we are a recommending body. We are studying this institution from our points of view as experts, faculty, and staff, and identifying ways to improve how it is that we work, create new areas of opportunity to grow revenues or reduce costs, or improve how well we work together. I'd like to spend just a minute to kind of ground you into where we are in the project timeline. Our work began back in October with the process of defining the scope for each of the task forces and beginning to understand from subject matter experts where there were opportunities for us to consider in the work that we're doing for improving processes, for looking at challenges that we've known about for years, but just haven't had a chance to address. From that point of view, we moved into the following 8 weeks, which is this opportunity identification. So we distilled a lot of information and began to say, so where are there opportunities for us to think about? And then we submitted those ideas to executive leadership in December. We're just now entering phase or step 3, which is this analysis and validation step, which is where we are right now. This is the process of identifying those areas of opportunity and then really diving deeply to understand what it looks like. What are the areas of risk to the institution? What are the costs, the benefits, the implementation difficulties? And that information then will go back up to the task force, into the Financial Sustainability Committee to prioritize, and then back up into the leadership for us then to move into implementation. So financial sustainability really is about a critical baseline requirement for all viable institutions. But I want to say the Financial Sustainability Initiative is not about downsizing. It's not about cutting staff. It's not about reducing faculty. Fundamentally, it's really about 4 things. It's about building upon and investing in our competitive strengths. It's about making this place the best place to work by streamlining how we work together. It's about removing obstacles to better collaborate, whether it's East, West, or different interdisciplinary programs. It's just about collaboration. And then it's about finding ways to become more innovative and creative in the work that we do. So think about this as we get to work today, about learning about how we have thought about the institution, how we've identified areas that have been problematic or areas that we've always wanted to get at but didn't have the chance to do so, and how all the task forces work together in creating new ways of thinking about how we do our work here at Stony Brook University. So as we begin, I'd like to just turn this over to Carmen and Michelle. I just want to remind you, most everyone are unfamiliar with the work that we do. So take your time and explain the initiatives, provide us with some examples, and let's just have a good time today. So Carmen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rose. I want to say that on behalf of the whole Operations Alignment Task Force that we really thank you for your leadership. And all of us feel really honored to be a part of this important project. And we're going to talk to you about these first 3 months, what we've worked on, what we've accomplished, and what we're doing going forward. But I just want to remind everybody about the Achieving Financial Sustainability website and all the information that's available there. So hopefully you see on your slide that there's the address is there, and we would encourage you to go and take a look at it. So I'm going to start by talking about the scope of the Operations Alignment Task Force. It really can be summed up by saying that we are trying to make it easier for you to get your job done at Stony Brook University. We're doing that by looking at ways how we can work more seamlessly as one campus, eliminating unnecessary duplication of services, trying to create better alignment, and being better stewards of our resources, and making things, improving things, whether you're in research, academics, or the healthcare side. The areas that we're looking at shouldn't be a surprise to you because these are really areas that we've heard as pain points and challenges. The first is human resources. How can we look at recruiting and hiring, timekeeping to make improvements? The next area is procurement. So how do we make sure you know what contracts are available to you? How can we use strategic sourcing to save more money? And how do we manage our vendor base better? In the IT area, we want to look at optimizing technology tools that we have available to us today, and new tools that we'd like to bring on board. We want to look at more efficient facilities management. And we want to also look at revocable permits and revenue contracts. So what this is the agreements that we need to put in place for third parties to do business here on campus, to use our campus resources. We want to make that process easier. If you're a budget manager here on campus, we want to make it easier for you to find data, have it be more transparent, and for you to have decision-making tools easier and at your use and more convenient. And finally, we want to make things easier for you here at Stony Brook University, but we cannot change the fact that we have policy, risk, and compliance issues. So we're going to make sure that we have good communication systems, we have good websites in place, so you know how to do the work here at Stony Brook. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you. So Carmen and I have a great group of task force members. These 19 members represent various areas across campus: facilities, human resources, academics, and human resource. This group is amazing. They have been supportive. They have been patient, especially with Carmen and I. They have been hardworking, and we thank them every week for their time and dedication to the task force. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge every member of the task force. Michael, Sarah, Jackie, Diane, Tim, Lisa, Ed, Bill, Melissa, Glenn, Henry, Nathan, Stephanie, Sharon, April, Yasmin, Michael, Martin, and Anastasia. Thank you. In our initial definition and design stage, we asked subject matter experts to come into the task force and present to us. Those experts were from administration and finance, marketing, Stony Brook Medicine, Human Resources, IT, Faculty Student Association, and Facilities. They talked to us about their pain points and opportunities. We also asked them to share with us what would they like to see change and what would they like to see done differently. This helped us tremendously. We received so much information that helped us to validate some of the ideas the task force discussed. We came up with over 100 ideas. We then took those ideas and we prioritized them. What would we like to see implemented within the next 3 to 5 months, 6 to 8 months, or within the next year? Our next steps after that was creating working groups. Carmen is going to talk a little bit later about what those working groups are, but they will tackle some of the ideas that the task force generated. The members of these working groups were chosen very carefully. We wanted to make sure that we chose individuals who had the most impact and who would be most impacted by the pain points and challenges for some of the changes. These members represent different departments and offices across campus. So our work to date has been about identifying categories of opportunities and key enablers. Some of those categories include human resource process improvements, streamlined hiring. An example of this is most departments may have a representative that works with human resources on the hiring process. There may be 1 or 2 individuals. There may be some movement where they're changed or someone leaves the university. That then leaves room for error in the sense of not everyone knows the policies and procedures and the process within the hiring phase. So we want to tighten up that process and make sure that everyone involved knows the procedures and knows the steps from beginning to end for hiring. Eliminate manual processes. What do we mean by manual processes? We're talking about paper, going paperless, having these documents and forms be electronic. We want to make sure that we're being more efficient, but also able to make your job a little bit easier to get done. Streamline processes for revenue generation. And this includes revocable permits and contracting process, which Carmen talked about a little earlier. More self-service tools. Move to online expense reimbursement, Concur. Carmen will talk a little later about Concur. But what do we mean by self-service tools? Again, we're looking at making the processes more efficient. An example, you've come back from a conference, traveling, you fill out your expense documents to get reimbursed, and before you even submit the document, you have to have several signatures. So some people run around campus in order to get these signatures, crossing your fingers that the person who needs to sign it is actually in the office that day. After you get the signatures, you submit your documents, and sometimes it takes longer than you would like in order to get reimbursed. What we're looking is to, again, streamline this process and going online. Having those who need to sign the document be able to log on to the system, click a check button, and submit the document, and it goes to procurement, and you're able to follow where your document is within the process. East-West campus synergies. Contract review for cost savings opportunities. So what do we mean by campus synergies? We're talking about leveraging the combined value that each side of campus brings to vendors and contracts. I have a few examples for you. First, let's talk about office supplies. We may have 20 vendors for office supplies. Do we need 20? Can we narrow that down to maybe 10 or even 5? Or if we need those 20 vendors, how can we leverage the 20 contracts that we have to lower expenses. Another example is COVID-19. Currently, and when this pandemic started, everyone wanted to get PPE supplies. We've had individuals purchasing from WB Mason, Staples, Amazon, and then we stopped to think, wait a minute, let's leverage the contacts the hospital have with vendors in order to provide supplies for all of campus instead of individuals going out and purchase it on their own. And lastly, data access and availability. Enterprise contract database. And what this is referring to is a database of contracts listed by vendor, so it can help you purchase various items. For example, you need to purchase office furniture. You'll be able to go into this database and look at the contracts with vendors we currently have. And these are vendors who have done business with the university, know our policies, procedures, and process to make you being able to purchase furniture for the office a little bit easier and more efficient. Carmen?
So we took these key learnings and then we're looking at our opportunities. And you're going to see some themes here. First opportunity is utilization of facilities. How can we generate revenue, more revenue, by making it easier for third parties to contract and use our wonderful Stony Brook resources, our facilities. So we're looking at how can we potentially centralize conference and events administration, making it some type of a friendly front door so that third parties know where to go and how to get through the contracting process. And even internally, we know where to go as one resource to help us through the process. Another area is information technology and leveraging tools. New tools, as Michelle mentioned, we are going to implement Concur expense management. She gave a great example of how complex the process can be when we're manually submitting our travel vouchers today. Concur will give us an automated system, and that's going to get launched and will happen later this year. Automating HR processes. Here we want to figure out, are there existing tools within PeopleSoft that we can use better within TMS so that we can improve those processes? In the procurement area, the opportunity here is how can we reduce cost? We're looking at about $100 million in spend that we can really impact across East and West Campus. These are contracts that are coming up in the next 3 to 12 months, and we want to look at how can we leverage spend across East and West to be able to save money. This is vendor spend. And then also, in addition, in the procurement area, is there low-hanging fruit? We're looking at the cell phone program as an example. Can we purchase or can we manage our cell phone program differently to also save money? And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And finally, human resources, something that impacts us all. How can we improve efficiency there? How can we automate paper processes and streamline the hiring and recruiting process? So with that, we move to the phase where we're at right now, which is working groups. That'd be the next slide. So in our working groups, we've identified and already charged 4 working groups. The first is the external clients working group. This is actually a joint task force working group between the Operations Alignment Task Force and the Optimizing Campus Resources Task Force that you'll hear from next week. So that task force is all about trying to make it easier for third parties to be able to utilize our resources for conferences, events, and other things. That's being co-chaired by Diana Hannon from Conference and Events and Lyle Gomes from Finance. The next working group is Cost Containment. This is being co-chaired by Bill Herman from Facilities and Steve Weissman from Stony Brook Medicine. And this working group is looking at that $100 million and trying to figure out how can we save 5 to 10% of that over the next 1 to 3 years. Almost 50% of our state spend is with our top 25 suppliers. There could be great opportunities where we can look at these big spend areas and look for opportunities to save money. And Bill and Steve have a great team together, have put a great team together. They really are looking at every different type of category of spend, and they've partnered people from the hospital procurement group and the campus procurement group and looking at these different opportunities. The third working group is streamlining HR recruiting and hiring. This is being co-chaired by Rachel Redhead, who is a HR partner for Do It, and Dr. Alfredo Fontanini, the chair for neurobiology. And they have a very large group that's working on this whole life cycle of hiring through recruiting. How is it working today for hiring and recruiting, for faculty, for staff, for research, for postdocs? So that's what they're looking at right now. And our fourth working group is the HR Paperless Processes Working Group, being co-chaired by Lori Cahill, an HR partner in campus operations and maintenance, and Sarah Campbell from Human Resources. And they're looking at these paper processes, as Michelle was discussing earlier, that we want to look at. Where is there a systematic solution that we can put in place? Where can we leverage things like DocuSign or Wolfmart or new tools like Concur to automate processes? But this is looking specifically in HR. So these are things like benefits enrollment. And when you have an employee change, for a name change or for a change in marital status, how can we look at systematic solutions for those? The other groups that we've launched just this month are called standalone teams. These standalone teams are different from working groups because there's only 3 to 5 subject matter experts that are going to dive into looking at an opportunity for maybe a month or less. So we've launched 4 different standalone teams. The first I mentioned earlier is the cell phone program. Glenn Itzkowitz from HSC is leading a group that's looking at what are other institutions, other higher eds doing in this cell phone, for their cell phone policy. How are they doing it on the East Campus? The hospital has many more cell phones than we do on the campus side. We have a lot to learn from one another. And how can we tackle this problem that we have of some cell phones sitting in drawers or people leaving and not getting those lines disconnected and continuing to pay where we shouldn't? How do we tighten up our administrative program so we don't have that? The next standalone team is being led by Michael Standridge in Procurement for Enterprise Contract Database. And we discussed this earlier as well. This is trying to figure out how we give you a system or a website, someplace where you can go to say, hey, I need to order some specialized piece of equipment. I want to see if we have a contract for that or a contract for that vendor that I know makes that equipment. Where can I go to find that information? Then there's 2 standalone groups that are being led by Dean Tufts in Facilities. The first is fleet management. Today we have a very decentralized fleet management approach for managing our vehicles. Is that the best approach? This team is looking at diving into that and seeing if a centralized approach or a different approach may work to help us to save money and provide better service. And then finally, Dean also has a group looking at the Zone Building Manager program. One thing we learned with COVID-19 is how important that building manager role is to keeping our facility operating smoothly. And so the Zone Building Manager program is really taking that to the next level and figuring out what's the best model for the university. So we have these 8 different groups that we've all charged, a lot of great work going on. And in the meantime, our task force is still looking at more ideas, more than the 100 we already thought about. We have been really challenged by Rose to say, what is the institution going to look like 5 to 10 years from now? And how can we generate these blue sky ideas of what's going to get us there to achieve those goals of what we want to look like in 5 to 10 years? And that's what our task force is really looking at right now. So we welcome all of your ideas. There's a place to submit ideas through the Achieving Sustainability website. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rose.
Thank you, Carmen and Michelle. I so appreciate the work that you've done. This has been an extraordinary group. I remember sitting through the first several sessions as we brought in subject matter experts, and we got through the process of learning from all these people, what are the opportunities going forward, and how much that brainstorming collectively really allowed us to focus on key opportunities to streamline and improve how we do things. So thank you so much for your leadership. I know it's been a lot of work. So before we launch into questions, I just want to talk briefly about our survey. So if you'd like to go to the next slide. We had more than 2,200 people respond to the Strategic Budget Initiative survey that we launched in December. We recently closed that survey just a week ago, and we're in the midst of evaluating it, and we'll put together a report and post that on the website by the end of the month. But there are a few things that I thought were really, really helpful for us to know. Most people are actually plugged in and learning about the Strategic Budget Initiative through the President's newsletter. But there's a few things that are really interesting to me in the findings. While many of us recognize that our specific unit or division may be difficult to make further cuts and reductions, there is a real hope in the leadership. More than 2/3 of the respondents said they feel strongly and believe deeply in leadership's ability to bring about change. And more importantly, they too embrace the willingness to change, more than 2/3 again. So it gives me great hope that where we're going is really a community journey. It's not the work of just the task forces or that other department over there. It really is all about us as individuals becoming members of the community and working together. So we're grateful. And as I said before, much more will be posted about the survey in the coming weeks. So let's get started with our questions. So as we start our time together, remember, I just want to say for those dialing in today and submitting questions to the Q&A function, sometimes questions fall in the area of where we have purview and oversight, and other times they don't. And so we'll try to answer them as best as we can as we start our time together. So I'm going to go first with Carmen. In what areas are you looking at saving money?
Well, thanks, Rose. So as I mentioned before, we're really, the cost containment working group is really looking at all areas of spend as opportunities. But one that I see that they identified recently is actually the example that Michelle mentioned around office supplies. We actually only thankfully have two primary office supply companies, one for campus and one for the hospital, and we're paying different prices. And we realize that if we leverage our spend, we could save well over $100,000 a year. So that's one of the first areas they're looking at. But really, nothing is off the table. We're really trying to identify savings by what contracts are coming up relatively soon, so we can make some impacts quickly if possible.
That's terrific. Thank you. This goes right to the contracts as well. What contracts will be reviewed for cost savings?
Really, again, like as I mentioned, the contracts that are being reviewing, we're first kind of starting with what's going to be expiring. What can we really address impact? We have areas like tank gas, for example. Tank gas is all of the gases that we use in research labs and other parts of the facilities. And that's something that we're just completing an RFP and we're just completing the contract on, and we're signing a multi-year contract. So that's probably not a good area for us to spend time. We're going to be looking at other areas where we know we can make an impact.
Yeah. One of the things that I find so interesting about the operations alignment group is we're actually just stepping back from the work that we always have done and saying, should we be doing it this way? And is there a better way of doing that? So just taking the time to study has really given us an opportunity to see things that we probably always knew, but take the time to evaluate what we could do about it to improve it or to reduce costs or to make the process more effective. So that's been really wonderful, and I've learned so much from that. All right, so I'm going to give you a question, Michelle. So what are some of the potential cost-saving opportunities between East-West campus?
Sure. Some of those potential cost savings could be furniture, making sure that we get the best price and the best rate in terms of ordering in bulk. Another cost-saving opportunity, in which Carmen talked about a little bit in the presentation, is cell phones. You know, is it possible for us to combine the different plans between both sides of campus and, again, look at the potential cost-saving opportunities?
Yeah. What's interesting to me when I joined was that we have two of everything. East side, west side, and oftentimes different prices, different kind of arrangements. So just looking at duplication and understanding, is it strategic? Do we really need to have differences in terms of specific either vendors or ways of doing things? Or can we align on processes and practices and policies? And I think that's really an important part of the work that you're doing. So thank you. All right. I'm going to go back to you, Michelle, with an HR question. With the automation of human resource functions, will there be less opportunity to interact with human resource professionals?
Sure. Not necessarily. So the goal of the task force is to look at reducing the time and red tape that creates barriers for us to get our work done. So we're looking at improving processes and services. However, if we find that there is a need to improve, or a need to increase person-to-person contact or communication, that is definitely something that we would make happen.
Yeah, I was stunned when I moved here about the number of things I had to complete in paper, and then somebody had to key it in. So then you have error opportunity, but that administrative work could be refocused on more customer service types of work. And so glad we're exploring that as we think about the future together. It's where is the value add, and how can we focus our efforts to make our work more effective and more enjoyable? You know, I think that's a part of our job as well. You mentioned in the presentation, find low-hanging fruit, e.g. cell phones. Do you plan on taking my cell phone away? Carmen, I'm going to go with you on that one.
No, the plan is not to just take cell phones away, but we do want to really challenge the policy and make sure that cell phones are required for doing your job. And maybe are there other ways that we can achieve the communication needs that don't require a cell phone? So the plan is just to look at how can we meet the needs of everyone on campus while still trying to be really prudent stewards of our resources.
Yeah. Having an effective campus-wide policy is a great place to start. Yeah. Thank you. When reviewing $100 million in spend across East-West campus, how will the spend be broken out to identify where the savings exist? I'm going to go back with Carmen since she is in procurement.
Yeah. So when we're looking at East and West campus, again, I think the categorization is key. So again, we're looking at everything from marketing categories, IT categories, lab supplies, medical supplies, uniforms, office furniture, and office supplies. We have the cost containment group has not only partnered a procurement resource with a procurement campus resource with a procurement hospital resource, but they actually also have subject matter experts. So people who use those goods or services are part of that team looking at those contracts and looking at that spend. So I feel like they've got a really good approach to how we can look at the different categories. I think another thing that is also being discussed is, for lack of a better word, it's like standardization. So if we have, there's no standardization today for for laptops, for example. So if we can say, you know, hey, today we buy about 20 different types of laptops, that's complicated, that's hard for IT to manage, and it's hard for us from a procurement standpoint to negotiate best spend or best pricing. So could we look at reducing that to 5 different laptops? There's always exceptions where people are going to get the tools and equipment they need to do their jobs, but oftentimes people just want a choice. They just want the menu. Which one do I need for my job, and to choose it instead of having sort of this open book idea of laptops. So there's those types of things where we can look at office furniture, office supplies, where we reduce the catalog of items. It allows us to leverage better pricing.
That's great. I remember hearing a story recently about, so the hospital has some very excellent procurement opportunities for PPE and all types of healthcare opportunities. And the dental school was actually paying for those similar things through the West Campus procurement versus joining the East Campus procurement. So again, looking at where are there opportunities to align our strategies and where we procure, I think is just a great opportunity for the campus as we move forward. So very cool stuff. Another one, are you able to track the spend and look for synergies across the entire university? There's keep coming at you, Carmen. This is your world.
I'm so impressed with everyone's interest in supply chain management and procurement. So, I mean, the short answer is yes, but it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
So just like most things with New York State, we have so many different funding sources and systems that it's hard to track total spend. However, most of our spend is state spend. So we were able to pull just under $700 million in state spend for last fiscal year, and that was our starting point. And then from that, and that's state spend across the hospital and the university. And then from that is where the team is trying to identify that $100 million of what's really impactable, what's really addressable in the next 3 to 12 months.
That's great. That's great. We're going on to procurement. We're going to need another non-procurement question. And I might have to start asking my own questions today. When looking at spend reduction, will standardization for certain commodity groups be considered?
And I actually,
You just answered that.
It's another great question, but I actually did answer that we absolutely, where it makes sense, we should look at more standardization.
Yeah.
So not only to make it easier for us to leverage better pricing, but also, again, oftentimes fewer selections, fewer options make it easier for everybody to do their job.
Yeah. I think operations alignment to me, when I go back and think about the East-West divide, first of all, I hate that. I think we have, it's one campus, but we are somewhat divided by Nichols Road. But it really is how should we operate as a university? What is strategic? What should be strategically different? And where are the shared approaches to doing things in a more uniform way necessary, or standardization? I don't like the word centralization, but I do like some shared policies and approaches that just bring us closer together in how we do things so that we can be more responsive to the entire community, no matter where you sit on this campus. So this operations alignment this evaluation is so important to us, just to figure out where do we optimize, who's got the best practices and policies that we might be able to merge together as we work together more often in the future. All right. So as you consider online tools and automated processes, will you recommend enhancements to training so that they are easier to use? And I'm going to go over to you, Michelle.
Yes, definitely. I think this is in some of our brainstorming in the beginning, especially in regards to human resources. We talked about that, that if we're going to change or enhance services, we need to be able to train individuals to make sure that they know how to use the system. So that is what the working group will be working on in terms of trainings for different areas.
Yeah. And I think just the implementation or development of how-to guides. So many of us have to do things maybe once or twice a year. And if you don't have a resource to go and find out how to do that, it just makes it more challenging. And then we all have to pick up the phone, and then that makes it more difficult. So training, how-to guides, much more streamlining of things so that it's simple going forward is so important for us. So we can actually do more of the work we want to do versus the administrative work of figuring out what needs to be done. All right. Will there be a substantial number of positions eliminated as a result of the anticipated changes? Well, let me take this one on for just a moment. First of all, we're a recommending body, and we're really looking at a couple things that are quite different. We're looking at process improvements, the ability for cost reductions through our procurement, areas of innovation in terms about creating more resource opportunities as an institution. And we're not the deciders. My hope when we developed the Financial Sustainability Initiative was that we could actually create a new pathway without having to make really draconian types of cuts that we see at other institutions. If you open up the Chronicle these days, you hear people cutting programs, cutting jobs, shutting down departments. And we've chosen to be creative by finding the efficiencies inside, creating opportunities for new revenues, and really becoming more effective as a university to achieve our ambitions. And so I will say there's never a guarantee that there won't be any positions cut in the future, but our hope is really about a different way forward. And that's where we all need to lean together as we move in a new direction at Stony Brook. So I took that one on. Okay. How do you actually think you're going to contain costs across East and West? I'm going to start with you, Carmen. I think we all need to talk about this because this is everything. It's everything we do. We use different technology. We use different tool platforms. We have Google and Microsoft. Not that we're going to force a change, but every time you use differences, it means and many jobs are split across campus, you have to take different steps for either side. So let's go with Carmen, Michelle, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about how we're going to identify costs, but I think what's important about the sustainability of this and the long-term impacts of it. One of the things that I think is so special and unique about this project from others I've had in my past professionally is that it's not being led by consultants or a third party. It's being led by all of us here. So those of us in the Operations Alignment Task Force that are generating these ideas and talking through them, we have to live with those, right? We're going to be here long term. So we are really being thoughtful about, what do we really want to bring forward as opportunities? And then how do we feel like we can sustain that going forward? Will we get the buy-in of our colleagues to make sure that whatever changes that we would recommend would be things that we can vet are in the best interest of the university and the hospital?
Yeah. Thank you. Michelle, you want to add anything there?
I would also say we have to start thinking differently. So we're not saying not to purchase certain items. We're thinking about how we can really manage that to get sort of the best bang out of, the buck, I guess you can say. For example, in campus residences, when we order mattresses, let's say for apartments in the residence halls, we don't order 5 mattresses. We order 50, 100, so we can get the best bulk discount rate that we can. So it's just thinking differently, not saying, nope, you can't purchase that. It's, how about I ask other offices if they're going to be making a purchase, and we can do it together to get the best rate. Yeah.
I think the other thing that is so important here is what you just mentioned, is we have to think differently. What are the shared ways of doing things or shared ways of buying shared products, and where can we be different? And as we think about this, I also want to say that we have come up with so many ideas, hundreds and hundreds of ideas across all these various task forces, and not all of these initiatives and ideas will come into implementation. We have to understand the risks to the institution, the impact on our jobs and on our ability to do the work and fulfill the mission of the institution. And so there is a process of distilling and then an implementation sequence that we will learn more about after we get through this analysis and validation stage. But again, it's all of us working together here. I'm going to skip this next question because it's more about our spend, and I think we can move on from there. Let's talk about the Concur project. And Carmen, this is right in the middle of the work that you do. Is the Concur project starting from scratch, and what modules will be implemented to support more efficient travel and expense T&E processing?
All right, that's a great question. Because the university actually looked at Concur several years ago and was moving down the path with Concur for a full end-to-end solution, including online booking through reimbursement. We definitely are still going to implement Concur, but we really have narrowed the scope. That was not a successful implementation several years ago, so we really had to look at it and say, what can we do different to make sure that we can successfully implement and meet the goals of trying to improve the travel reimbursement process for folks. So we are going to be implementing the expense module of Concur. We'll have a few bells and whistles as well that you'll learn about in training, but primarily it's that whole process of the travel vouchers, the approvals, the submission, and the reimbursement process that we would look at automating that. And we have a group that's been put together, a steering committee that includes folks from research and faculty, administration, all athletics, another important one. And we're going to just be kicking off actually tomorrow. We're kicking off our meeting with Concur, and it's about a 6-month implementation.
Great. Thank you. That's going to help so much. It was one of the topics that came up in every single task force is, can we make that more efficient? All right. Are you addressing sustainability considerations in recommendations about operational alignment? Michelle?
Sure. I think it's definitely part of the conversation that I want to say, Carmen, that each working group will be looking at. And it's part of their research and their deep dive into improving our campus.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of other institutions kind of do something once, and then as the pressure goes off, they kind of fall back. So whether it's a procurement way of doing business, they kind of make the first cuts, and then we forget about how important this is. And I want to say a couple things. Money saved is money spent on different missional things. So it's not going into the coffers of some other. It gives us missional flexibility to really apply that to the academic research and patient care missions that we have. And so I think learning how to live differently and to do our work more effectively together really allows us to invest in us. And I think we all want to do that a little bit more effectively going forward. All right. How will streamlining recruitment processes save money? University and hospital processes are very different. How can you ensure that it won't slow the process down? And I'm going to give this to Michelle.
Sure. I think it's a great question. The first part in terms of streaming recruitment processes, I use as an example, again, for the department that I work in campus residences, we have a hiring season. You know, in the spring semester, in terms of hiring for residence hall directors, we do that in the spring. We post on different websites, recruitment websites for these positions. An example would be if we know the timelines or the cycles that different departments on campus hire, we can look at getting, again, a bulk rate with some of these websites to post our positions instead of, playing, for every position, it's $200, but we have 10. So what kind of discount can you give us to post this for the next 2 months? In regards to the university and the hospital process are very different. I agree. It definitely is different. And I think that is going to be one of the challenges the working group will have in making sure that, when we talk about changes, that it doesn't vary so drastically that it then makes everything complicated instead of making it being efficient, that we really have to look at the users of some of these systems.
I think what was interesting was the East-West divide, that East is much more effective. Their time from posting to hiring is quite a few days shorter than West. So in many ways, there's a lot that we can learn on the West campus about how to improve some of the processes that are already have been studied on the hospital side that might affect some real change or help us. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say that I believe that, Rachel and Alfredo, who are leading that working group, they are going to focus primarily initially on the faculty, staff, and postdocs and researchers, because hospital, as you mentioned, is a bit more streamlined. They use different system. So focusing first on kind of the university side of the hiring processes.
Here's a good question. Have you reached out to leaders of other campus systems with medical centers to find out what works in terms of operational alignment? Great question.
I'll take that one. I mean, the short answer is no. I don't think that we really have, as a task force at least. reached out to other medical centers. Many of us have, as part of pulling ideas together, have sort of canvassed our own network of other colleagues who do similar things within academic medical institutions. But as a formal thing, I think that's a great opportunity that we should look at still with our task force.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's a great question and a great idea for us to pursue. So thank you. Last question. Where does campus governance fit into this process beyond the composition of the task forces and working groups? So I'm going to let you all, let's start with Michelle on this one. There's a lot here.
I think it fits in with the Financial Sustainability Steering Committee. Because at the steering committees, each of the different task force, we come and we report on our findings. And I think the steering committee gives us that reminder about what we're missing. You know, they take a look at, you know, what we've talked about, what we've discussed, what has been proposed. And Rose does a great job of challenging all of us to say, what is missing? Like this isn't perfect. What is missing? And I think that's where the campus governance fit in the process.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to add. I think that Michelle summed it up really well. I think that the steering committee also, you know, will take things to faculty senate and to other parts of the university where we might be moving into uncharted territory or talking about potential changes. We really rely on your leadership and this other folks in the steering committee to help guide us to make sure that we're inclusive and we're bringing the right ideas and perspectives to the table as we're looking at making recommendations.
Yeah. I want to just put a kind of a final wrapper on this. Campus governance is this project. This project is not executive leadership looking down and saying, you will do this. This is campus leaders, faculty, staff, administrators who are doing the everyday work of the university, making decisions on behalf of us. We're working closely with the University Faculty Senate. We have many members within each of the task forces, now in the working groups. Richard Larson serves on the executive leadership. But the idea when we built this was we as a community should be able to create and find our own way to solve some of our financial sustainability challenges by collective visioning, by bringing us together. And I think that is true governance, is when we work collectively together to design a pathway forward that we're all engaged in, we can come up with something that we all believe in as well. And that is so important. So I thank you all for that question. And I want to thank both of you, Michelle and Carmen. You have been doing heroic work over the last 3 months. I just think of all the hours that we've spent in meetings, on phone calls, reading documents, coaching others, identifying new leaders to form these working groups. We now have hundreds and hundreds of faculty and staff now just spreading out on these working groups. And I know it's a great deal of work. I also want to thank our task force members, our working group members, and the subject matter experts who've really been engaged in this. I think when we launched, we had over 200 people. I think it was 120 people in the first iteration. We are now approaching 350 people who are engaged in the various task forces, and we have about 6 or 7 more to launch. And so it really is a campus initiative, and I want to just thank all those members who've committed so much time and their energy to really create a pathway forward. And finally, I want to thank you, the audience, for participating today. If you feel like you have subject matter expertise or a real point of view, I would urge you to reach out to either the co-chairs or submit a comment on the Financial Sustainability website. We have a comment form there, and get involved. This is our lives, our university, our mission, our impact. And I believe it's up to each and every one of us to believe and to work together as we get going. And so as we wrap up today, thank you. If we didn't get to your questions today, we will be completing an FAQ on our website and posting it. But for all of you, I say thank you. Thank you very much. And I wish you all a good evening. Thanks for being here.